1, 2, 3.
Hello, welcome to Rock the Cash Bar. I'm Ben Mowbray.
And I'm Diane Gallagher.
Every week we pick one song and do a deep dive into the lyrics and explain the different ways they've been interpreted.
We will also discuss how the song connected to us on a personal level, focusing on all the embarrassing details.
Glad to have you here. Enjoy the show. We're all together.
Look at you!
Jeremy's in town. Thanks for coming.
No, thank you.
We're coming live from the studio here in the Houston Heights. Welcome to the castle.
Thank you. It's gorgeous.
Oh, thank you very much. It was, I think Bob Biggerstaff described it as, are you in the lobby of like an Apple store?
Yeah.
Yeah, we really are.
A little bit.
Kind of. It feels that way.
But I would live in a lobby of an Apple store.
Oh, yeah. So clean.
Who wouldn't live in the lobby of an Apple store?
Cheers, guys. Look at these. If you're
Cheers.
watching, look at these ridiculous cups we're drinking out of.
My tiki mug collection is finally getting a use.
I love
Cheers,
it.
everyone. Welcome to the Cash Bar.
So,
Jeremy, this is your episode.
Yes.
We're doing Superchunk.
We are.
Can I tell you, this is hilarious, at least to me, just another example of how dumb I am. When you said Superchunk, I had them confused with Super Drag.
Sure.
Oh.
Super Drag had that big hit in the late 90s, that who sought out the feeling.
Yep.
So I thought, like, I'd always liked that song, even though it was a one-hit wonder. And I thought, well, this will be fun. Like, we're getting into their B-sides, into their deep cuts, and figure out what that band is all about. Like, nope, not the same band at all.
Yeah.
No, I went a much deeper. Well, actually, like many things in my life, this is somewhat the fault of Greg Warren.
Yeah.
Like most things in my life, honestly, because when he was on, I think the last time he referenced like, I think it was, I was making fun of him for Herb Alpert or
Yes.
just his general lifestyle or whatever I was making fun of Greg for.
Right.
And he referenced, he's like, yeah, Jeremy's two bands, The Replacements and Superchunk. And I was like, oh, if Greg knows that, then we should probably do it. And they had an album come out last Friday.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, this seems kind of perfect. But
Okay.
yes, so this is, it feels a bit more obscure, especially like this song I picked is even more obscure, but we'll get into the whys.
Okay.
But yes, Chapel Hill, North Carolina's Superchunk.
Yes. Yeah, I was like, not only did he pick like a kind of an obscure band to most people, and then I was scrolling through their songs on Apple, and I was like, and he picked their most obscure song. Like I'm scrolling.
Yeah, well, like I said, we're gonna get into it, but it's the first track off what like I think most people consider is like they're not like probably not their best album, and I felt that way for like a really long time too. So that's kind of why I picked it, was like I want to get into like why I eventually fell in love with this song.
Okay.
So
And why you eventually fell in love with this band.
yeah, and why I mean, because that took a really long time.
That's interesting how there's someone that's just been on your peripheral forever and then you just never like dove in.
Yep.
Okay.
So I mean, I went to college in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and I saw them at least twice in college.
Mhm.
And like I thought I saw them in Winston where I went to school, but I just saw them in Winston last weekend, and they were like, hey, this is our first time playing here since '95. And so I was like, nope, that wasn't me. I wasn't there yet. So
Oh, wow.
saw them somewhere in college. And I was also just thinking about like the timing of everything is like, I saw them and like the show was like so energetic and kind of like punky, and like I showed you the videos of the show I went to, like the singer just jumps all over the place.
Right.
And it's like fun. And then whatever album was out, I guess it was Come Pick Me Up, is like much quieter.
Oh.
And I was just like, oh, this doesn't feel like the same band. And like, I was like, well, why didn't I just go into deeper? Like, why didn't I look further into their catalog? And I was like, oh yeah, because it was 97. Because you had to go physically buy an album. Like you couldn't now, like, well, if I see a band and, I'll look them up on Spotify the next day, be like, I like that track.
Yeah.
Like I didn't have the money to go buy their entire back catalog. I was just like, I didn't like that, album, whatever. And then this album that this is off of, Here's to Shutting Up, was the same thing. I saw them in like 2001. It was kind of the same thing. I was like, oh, that album's just quieter and not what I saw. And it wasn't till 2011 when I was touring with Posehn, we would always do the same thing every Saturday, where we would go eat at the greasiest restaurant in town and then go record shopping.
That's a day.
It was a day. That was like every Saturday for like 10 years of my life.
What a lovely mandate that is.
But we were in Denver and we went to Twist and Shout Records, and like I didn't really want to fly back with a vinyl, so I bought a used CD, and they had Here's Where the Strings Come In. And I was like, oh yeah, Superchunk. I haven't thought of them in years. Like and I put the first track of that album on, and I was like, this is what bands should sound like. Like, it's so weird to like come to that later in your life, you know what I mean? So it was like, it took me until, even though I had seen him like back when I was like 20, it took me till I was like 34 to be like, oh, this is my favorite band.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, it was just kind of like a weird evolution. And even like getting to the song, which we'll get into once we get into the lyrics, like even this album was still like, oh, yeah, I still like that album.
Yeah, it happens.
It took so long to understand this album. But anyways, that's the long and short of my relationship. And now they're like the band that I've seen the absolute most. And like, it's just the weird thing, like the Triangle in North Carolina, like friends of mine work for their record label. Like most people I know them. Like, I don't know them personally, but I see them at the grocery store. Like, it's just very strange.
I can't imagine that world where like one of my all-time favorite bands I can run into at Starbucks.
Yeah.
We're your local rock stars.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, the album this is off of, they did a reissue I think like 3 months ago, and it came with a bonus disc of like demos, and I was listening. It was a CD. I was listening to the CD in my car because that's the only place I have a CD player anymore.
You still have one?
My new car, I actually just got a new car. It still has a CD player.
Whoa.
I drove past Mac McCon, the singer, as I'm listening to this. Like, it was so weird. I'm like, is that? Yep, that's it. Okay, great.
That's really cool. That will never happen to me.
Turn it up and watch him run away from you.
Yeah, seriously.
I'm gonna go find Manny Fresh's Neighborhood and just like jam until it comes out like really loud in Friendswood. He'll be like, wait, I'm in Friendswood. Who's doing this?
All right, I'll come talk to you. I guess we're gonna put out an APB on Manny Fresh.
Yeah.
We're constantly Manny Fresh. If anybody knows how to get in touch with him.
We're gonna manifest you into our lives. That's what we're gonna do. Diane loves that.
The bartender from the Toasted Coconut wants to continue his incredibly annoying conversation with you.
All right. Should we get into these lyrics?
Let's get into the lyrics. Do you want to read them?
Ooh. You don't.
Not
no
really.
pressure.
Nope. All right, we're not going to switch it up that much.
All right.
This is Late Century Dream by Superchunk. Well, you never did like the way the road stretched out, never knowing where all these oily black threads are tied.
This is very visual.
Yeah, that feels very like when I first heard this song and started reading the lyrics. Do you think, does that remind you of like your road comic days?
I think it does. I mean, I honestly never made that connection till right now, but like why this song eventually tied to me is the end of my road comic days. And it like, I didn't even catch that part of it, but yeah.
I was fascinated by road people because it seems like there's this whole culture. Like there's these towns that seem to only exist, like their economy is built entirely on people passing through. Yeah, I'm always just like for the couple of weeks that I was actually able to be on the road as a comic, I was just so thrilled to be part of that. Like,
oh, I love it.
Now I am intransigent. Is that the right word? Or transient?
Transient.
Yeah.
Well, that was, I can't remember, one of the cities we passed through on the way here from Austin. I was telling Lauren.
Were you on 290 or I-10?
290.
Okay.
And I was telling Lauren, I was like, this reminds me of also this town in Pennsylvania, which is just like only there. It's like scattered truck stops, gas stations, and a Walmart. Yeah. And like it's only there for people who are transient. Like, I mean, obviously people have to live there because they work there. Lauren, do you remember what town that was?
Giddings. Okay, yeah.
And it's like we passed through it. I was like, oh, this is exactly like this town in Pennsylvania that when I lived in New York City, I would go through constantly. And it's the same thing. It's just, we're just here for gas.
Yeah, we're here for gas. We'll feed you some bad barbecue in Texas usually. And then you send you along your way. Don't hang out. We don't want you to.
Yeah, we've got your beef jerky and your cigarettes. Exactly. Move along.
And when you're in Texas, kolaches, a lot of kolaches, and that's only a thing that we get here, and Czechoslovakia.
Yeah, I've not had one.
Oh my God. Get a kolache. I could go into how we're calling kolaches the wrong thing, but we won't get into that now.
That's a food nerd debate.
Yeah.
That's a different podcast altogether.
Yeah.
Under the lights of a spaceship landed on the ice of a curve on sand. There's a clover leaf that'll wreck your life.
Under the lights of a spaceship landed on the ice of a curve unsanded. there's a clover leaf that will wreck your life.
Okay, there's a lot of poetry here
Yep.
for early morning. I'm drinking a beer. I mean, give me a minute.
Under the lights of a spaceship landed on the ice of a curve unsanded. That just seems like a lot of uncertainty to me.
Yes.
Like that's just and it's road thoughts. Like how many times are you driving at night, under the lights, so you see planes overhead and everything like that. It's like, yeah, this is where the aliens are going to come.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of, that line always struck me as like, there's this, basically this piece of hope that you have discovered and you have attached yourself to. And it's so interesting, you keep making these road allusions, because so this was their last album before they stopped for 10 years. They did this album, they did one more tour. There's a documentary on the tour where you can tell they're absolutely miserable. And then they just stopped.
Yeah.
And so it's like
just with each other, or just
I mean, the Mac and Laura still owned Merge Records together. Mac did a bunch of solo albums that like the guitar player was on, Jim Wilbur, but like they stopped touring and they still played Chapel Hill like once a year-ish, but like they stopped touring after this album as a band for 10 years. They stopped recording.
Wow.
And so it's like the fact that you're picking up all these road illusions, this is why this song eventually hit me. It was when I decided to stop touring and I heard this and I was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah, this can happen.
I still vividly remember I was sitting in a hotel room in Orlando, which now that I'm retired, I feel I can say this. Of all the like major city comedy clubs, the Orlando Improv is where everything goes to die. It's the most miserable, like if there's any comics listen to this, it's the most miserable week. You stay in this like what's it called? Hilton something. It's like one of like the side Hilton things. Right now on International Drive in Orlando, the shows always suck. They're just terrible.
Is the crowd older?
The crowd is older.
Okay.
They're mostly parents who I think like took their kids to Disney and then like they want their night out, but like it's this weird balance of like they want you to be clean, like not the club, like half the crowd wants you to be clean because like we've been doing family stuff all day, and the other half is like I just got rid of my damn kids. You better dirty it up.
Yeah.
So like you can't win.
Talk about cock.
Yeah. And it was the week I knew I was done. I was in Orlando and I was like, I just can't mentally do this to myself anymore. And I was like, I'm not going to mention the comic, but I was also working with comic who was like unbelievably rude while I was on stage, like running through the crowd, like making a mess of my whole set.
That is sacrilege.
Yeah, gigantic jackass.
So
but anyways,
I hope he's listening.
so and I knew it, and that's when I heard this. That's when this album finally caught, like this song, and then this is actually probably my favorite album by them now, which is weird because it's the one I didn't like, but it's like it caught me right then. And I think that you're finding all these road illusions are all probably right there, because that line to me is just basically like you're kind of fumbling around and then you find this like Clover, like this, obviously the symbol of luck, and you're like, oh, things are about to turn around for me. And as the song progresses, you'll see like, oh no, you should not have attached yourself to that.
That was a trap.
Yeah, it jumped so quickly from like just these three lines. I keep getting like, it's like stuck in a loop here, like under the lights of a spaceship landed, which sounds like something interesting is about to happen. And then ice of a curve unsanded, where like shit's about to spin out of control. And then there's a clover leaf, but then the next line is that'll wreck your life. Shit.
And that, I mean, again, it's like to go back to my own comedy career, but like that's how I felt. Like I think we've talked about this. I never planned on doing comedy. Like I had a friend who talked me into doing open mic, and I was like, well, this is the dumbest, easiest thing ever. I'm literally doing this just to prove a point that any asshole can do it. And then like, 15 years later, you're like, oh, this is how I've made a living. And now 20 years later, it's like, oh, I'm still in the business. I just don't. So it's like, yeah, that's kind of how I felt too. It's like this spaceship was just like, look at this. And I was like, this isn't going to amount to much. And then go like, oh, this is my whole life.
This is now the organizing principle. Here you go.
Isn't it crazy like that? There's so many people, and I feel like this is what happens. The ones that are like super, super successful, they always knew they wanted to do comedy and just kind of had this like map leading them there. I'm like you, I didn't have a fucking clue I wanted to do comedy. I literally fell into it, happened to be at an open mic and like, I think I'm funnier than that guy. I'm just gonna do it for a spoof, just like, because they were like, do you want to sign up? I'm like, fuck no. And then like the first couple, I'll tell you off air who it was, went, and I was like, well, I can do better than that. And then I'm still fucking in the life. It's so nuts.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, even because I agree with you. Like, I know people, like, we put out albums with people where, like, I'm talking to them about their jokes, like when we're doing the album, and they're like, yeah, it kind of reminded me of like so-and-so's bit, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, wow, you have such a deep knowledge, where like mine is just like, when someone else is like, hey, have you ever heard so-and-so's joke? And I'm like, why do you know that? Like, I was in a room when he told it on a stage. Like, I was there drinking a beer in the back. Why do you know that?
I just know that.
And
I used to have such a head for it. I could memorize, like I would go see my favorite headliners. I could swear, like I'd watch them one time and memorize their whole 45 minutes.
Oh my.
Like
Oh, wow.
I was just so in, I can't do it now. You know,
I never had that gear. Like, it was my first time in a comedy club was performing at a comedy club.
Whoa, that's bizarre.
Yeah.
Like, going back, like I always was a fan of comedy. I just never pictured myself doing it. Like, I had Bill Cosby's himself memorized. I had like one of George Carlin's sets memorized. Like, I did love comedy, but I just never ever grew up picturing myself doing it.
I didn't picture myself doing it, but when I like first went to go see like my first live comedy show, I went, it was David Tell was the headliner, maybe the best club comic who's ever lived.
Yeah.
So I watched him and just obviously fell in love with the power that he had. But I knew, like, I wanted to be respectful of it, so I went to open mics for months and never got on stage.
Oh,
Like,
I should have
wanted
done
to-
it that way.
Like I was
See,
trying to observe, trying to behave the right way.
I was completely opposite. I didn't realize what I was getting into. And like, so I started within like, I don't know, 6 months I was hosting. Like, I just got a couple hosting gigs at Go Bananas in Cincinnati, in this club called Jokers, which is no longer there in Dayton, which is where I met Greg. And, you know, those first 6 months went pretty well, but I didn't know any better. I was like, yeah, I did 3 open mics. Now I'm a host here. Like, that's how things work.
It's wild.
And then like the next year, both clubs were like, oh, you can have a week a month hosting. So like I was working 2 weeks a month. I didn't know anything. My first 3 weeks that next year were, these were my first 3 weeks. After like the first year where I kind of just fell into some hosting gigs.
Yeah.
Jimmy Pardo, Dave Attell, Mitch Hedberg.
Oh my
shit.
God.
And I'm just like, yeah, whatever, this business is easy.
Yeah.
Like, you just start and then you work with these guys. What?
Pretty cool. Yeah,
That is the crazy thing about comedy. It's like nothing else. You know, like you literally, like you can't like pick up a guitar and go to your local club and then Mick Jagger shows up.
Yeah, and you're
just
you get to
doesn't
open
happen.
for him.
Yeah, you know 2 chords.
Yeah.
Come on up.
Yeah, my first guest spot was for Jimmy Schubert. It was supposed to be for God, I can't think of his name. I hate when I start a story and I can't remember, but it was the worst. He the New York guy, he's an Italian Republican.
Nick DiPaolo.
Nick DiPaolo.
Yeah.
That was supposed to be my first one. And Pete Pirelli asked me, I was up there for open, or it was like a Wednesday, and he was sitting next to Nick, and look, they both looked right in my eyes, and he's like, Diane, you want to do your first guest spot with Nick and on Friday? And I was like, yes. Told my whole family, a bunch of people came, showed up that day. Nick's like, I don't want to have any guest spots.
Oh.
He looked right in my face and said it, and I was like, you motherfucker. So my family had to watch Nick DiPaolo and not me. But then the next week, Jimmy Schubert came in town and was like, sure. So, yeah.
Absolutely, I don't mind at all.
Yeah.
Everybody lives in a knot. Everybody lives in a knot. Everybody's trying to make space around what they think they've got.
And everybody lives in a knot. Everybody lives in a knot. Everybody's trying to make space around what they think they've got. And then that repeats. That kind of goes both ways. That's uplifting and also kind of,
Where's it uplifting?
we're all in this together,
Oh, okay.
and we're all trying to do the best we can around it. You
Got
know,
it.
like we all have problems and we're all trying to make the best of it. Like there's that positivity. And then there's also, we are all living in a knot.
Yeah, just, I mean, the anxiety that's suggested in that, again, is like, especially at the point at which like this song finally caught me, was like, it was just endearing. Like, so when I saw them last week, the person that opened for them is a singer who performs under the name Torres, and she goes, yeah, I was a really depressed person until I was 30. And then once I turned 30, it just all turned into anxiety. Anybody else? And I was like, oh, hello.
Yep.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, when he says knot, I don't know why, I think of like a pretzel knot, and I just see like this, like we keep making the same curve, thinking things are going to change, and then it goes right back into the same curve. And you know, people aren't watching, you can't see what I'm doing with my fingers, I'm talking with my hands, but just like we just can't get out of this like loop of making same mistakes over and over and over.
Yeah, like once you recognize that it's depression, like you naturally want to turn it into something else. You know, like you can do that emotional sort of alchemy and just, okay, well, what is it that's making me depressed? And then you recognize that, and I think that's when it turns into anxiety. You're like, what is it that's making, what is it about my personality that's making me sad? You know, and then you start stressing about that thing. I think that's part of growing up, or at least it is to me. Like
being an adult is so fun. I didn't start having panic attacks till 30s. So yeah, it's depression in your 20s, anxiety through your 30s, and it's something happens, and my therapist talks about this. In your 40s is when your body's like, you're going to deal with it now, or you're going to have a severe drug and alcohol problem until you die. You have to choose. You can't have both.
You are not bouncing back anymore.
This is the fork in the road where you make that decision. And I think a lot of people, once they hit 40, or you know, whoever's listening, you're like, yep.
You don't have the stamina for your own temperament anymore. Nope. Something's got to change.
No, I mean, that timeline is like, the therapist I had for a long time, who was great. Unfortunately, I moved, and I guess you can't do that across state lines in some states. But
really, you can't like Zoom.
No, not at least not in the state of Missouri, which is where she's located.
Oh,
but
you're not licensed to practice in the other state.
But it was like I started going to her about 3 months after my 40th birthday. Like it's so funny you hit that timeline. It's like I turned 40.
My
and
life,
like essentially one day, like was just so upset in my house. Like I was like, because I had this house in St. Louis, but it was like very isolating. And I was just like, I can't do, and like, she just happened to have a practice like essentially up the street and across the street. And I was like,
it was like, I could get there. I could walk there if I had to.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I often did actually.
Yeah.
And it was just like, oh, well, why did I wait on this till I was 40? Like, man, my 30s were a mess. I could have used something.
It's the stigma we were grown up, like raised with, and it's finally breaking down that you're not a nut bar if you go see a shrink, which is a terrible word. But yeah, it's depression in your 20s. And then like I had my first panic attack in my 30s, and I had my first little minor nervous breakdown at the end of my 30s. And that's when I'm like, I need to go see someone. Yeah.
I never have like panic attacks or things that come out of nowhere. Like it's always because of like some specific thing that it doesn't like. I was talking to a friend of mine who has pretty severe panic attacks, and he was just like just yesterday. It was just like it came out of the blue. Like
so
I don't know what the hell was wrong.
What they say happens is that when you're in the stressful situation, you know, your body kind of compensates and deals with it, and it's not until like the next day when it's already done and it's gone and your body kind of relaxes, that's when like the back end comes and hits you, and you're like, can we freak out now? Like you dealt with it in real time, but can we like talk about it now? And that's when you have the breakdown.
Yeah. I was talking to this guy and I was thinking I'm probably doing more harm than good, because he's like a 25 or 26-year-old bartender. And I think probably what was stressing him out is it's like, is this really going to be my life? Like, should I go back to school? What do I need a goal or something like that? Then I'm sitting there, 42-year-old grand old wizard. It's like, it's not so bad, man. He's got to be looking at me like, I don't want to tell you.
You're like, why not?
I don't like the way this looks at all.
That's so funny on two levels though, because one, I feel that way now when I talk to younger comics.
Yeah.
But two, like the best times I've had, like the most relaxed I've ever been in my life, the least panic attacky I've ever been in my life is when I was just bartending.
Yeah.
Like not managing the bar, not just going in, doing my shift,
autopilot,
brought absolutely nothing home with me but cash.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like it was like, and I tell young comics, I'm like, I gotta quit this bartending job. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, trust me, it's not bad.
Yeah.
Pretty good gig.
I've seen the other side of it.
The best time of your life. You can turn it into your whole life. It's possible.
You want to perform in Orlando? It's not great.
Don't get married and have a kid, but like just keep doing this.
I would have loved to have performed in Orlando. Like when I was in my mid-20s, if I had a week in Orlando, it would have been just like, I'm going to Florida.
Well, but I mean, that's kind of the thing. And you said, because I mean, I was on the road for so long. And I mean, I think we've talked about that. There was that 3-year period where I didn't have a week off. Like I was just touring for 3 years straight.
Were you homeless?
Well, no.
Did you have a base to go back to?
That was the mistake I made. It was so I had this, not to get like too into it, but I had this weird thing where like I had a manager, I shot a pilot, and I just had work for 3 years straight. And like, but in it, like my manager convinced me, like, you have to move to New York or LA, like, which I still think is ridiculous. Like, because planes go places.
Right.
Like he'd be like, well, what if we get you an audition tomorrow? I'm like, if it's a worthwhile audition, I'll just get on I mean, trust me, anyone should encourage anyone to move out of St. Louis. I strongly agree with that. But like in general, like so not only was I not homeless, I was living in New York and paying insane rent. And I was there for like a week, a month, maybe, because like all of my work was, I mean, you know, I keep talking about Orlando, but the majority of it was the Midwest. And so like, I was like, had a place in New York, but most of the time I was like either crashing at my parents' house in Ohio or at Sean O'Brien's place in St. Louis. Like, and then when I left New York, then I had this fun little period where I essentially became Dylan McKay. Like I just lived at a hotel for a while.
I would love it.
That's Dylan McKay from 90210,
Yes.
kids.
Sorry, kids.
Kids and older people.
Rest in peace.
No, that was actually kind of fun because there was this really nice hotel in St. Louis that like it's next to like the big theater, and I performed at the theater, and I got to know like the group sales lady, and so I was like, hey, if I just stay here like 2 to 3 days a week, can I get the rate like you give the theater? And she's like, yeah.
Oh, nice.
So like it didn't cost that much. It was this really fancy hotel in St. Louis. So that was the fun part of it. Was like I said, just like essentially being Dylan McKay. I was like, where do you live? A hotel.
Yeah.
That sounds just fantastically seedy.
Oh, I love it. I love hotels. I could do it.
But it burns you out. And like,
I'm
I mean,
sure.
kind of where this was like, I, you know, the pilot didn't get picked up. My manager was an idiot. And
Nice. Hope you're listening.
no, I mean, it's when I say that, I don't mean that to be pejorative, but like literally we had 2 deals for the pilot. The pilot was it was a travel show. You can still see the sizzle online, but like it was a travel show where I was going to go around to different record stores in the country.
Oh,
And it was going to be like that.
Yeah.
And Dick Clark Productions was interested, and we had another interested buyer, and we shot the sizzle with me and the guitar player from the Flaming Lips. That was my
nice.
co-host.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so I was like,
I would have watched that.
it's on YouTube. You can find it.
Really?
Yeah, he's wearing a cape.
I love it.
So, and all when I say my manager was an idiot, it was an MP4 file that I sent him, and I was like, hey, we shot this. Can you sell this around? And he just kept being like, I can't open the file. And I was like, my mother can open this file. You are in entertainment.
Oh my God.
And that was just like, again, I don't mean it to be pejorative, but if you can't open an MP4 file.
Yeah, and you can't find the nearest 20-year-old.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Jeremy, I still believe in this project. Records are back.
I mean,
and they still exist. Can we like get people going back to record stores?
Well, if anyone's listening, I still own it. I still own the idea.
Okay.
Thanks to my lawyer. But yeah, it's like registered with the Writers Guild. I still have the idea. But no, I was like really like, it was just one of those things. And I think this is, you know, when you talk about the road analogies, I know we're halfway through this, but like, I think, I don't know, but I mean, probably for them as a band too, it's like you work so hard and I'd worked so hard and you really felt like you were on that, like, you know, tipping point or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, I have a manager now. Now I shot a pilot.
Yes.
Like now this is all working. And then it all just like went away. And then you're just in Orlando and you're just like, you know, and I mean, I hate, like, I definitely became that person who was like, well, it's 3 PM. I might as well have a beer. You know what I mean? Like,
I was gonna say there are so many comics that had such severe drug problems. This could have been the end for you if you were
yeah. I mean, but that's
a needle pusher. You know what I mean?
So you have to almost like veer, like, because yeah, I saw it. And it's like you have to veer the other way. Then, you know, like you have to go like, and you know, we'll get into it more with that. I kind of feel like that's what they did for a little bit too until they got back to it. But like it was like, I mean, my pullout from comedy was much longer than I expected, somewhat due to the pandemic. And then being the guy that designs audio for comedy clubs now, and they're during a pandemic, they're like, well, you're here anyways, can you feature? Because no one else will fly out here. So it tended to extend my career. But yeah, it really, like, it was something where I looked at myself again in Orlando and I was like, well, you have started drinking again at 2 PM. And you know, you can pull the show off kind of drunk because you're not writing anymore. So there's nothing new. Like, you're just autopilot. You're just autopiloting up there. You don't care. This is not going to be sustainable for a life. Like this is, you can't, like,
Yeah, this means that the passion is gone.
Yep.
So-
Having that wherewithal is like, okay, all right, I got it.
but it's that thing too. You guys remember when you were young comics? It's like I always hated the guy where you're like, or woman or whatever, usually a guy though, where you're just like, oh, it's the same fucking jokes
Yeah.
again.
He doesn't
Like,
write anymore.
you don't write anymore, but I'm a young comic and I'm writing constantly, and I can't get like, I'm a host and I can't feature. I'm a feature, I can't get an off night headline
Mhm.
because you're just gumming up the works
Yeah.
with the same and like I was like, oh, I also can't be that person to young comics.
I don't
Like
wanna
that
be that
person's
guy.
gross. Like
Yeah.
I think we've talked about it. I keep bringing up Greg only because it's a mutual friend, but like Greg has been doing this forever.
Yeah.
But Greg is still writing.
Yes.
Like it would be insane to tell Greg's you're gumming up the works because every time
He
you see
doesn't.
him, he has new material. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, then by all means, and I mean, you know, Attell's a great example of someone who's been doing it forever, but
Yes.
it's like it's still new material, but like that guy, and that's why I became of like, you're kind of drunk and just doing the same shit we saw last time. It's like, oh, gross. I need to stop.
Good on you for recognizing it and stopping though, because some of them aren't gonna do it.
I know.
They're not gonna stop, are
I
they?
know. That's
But you know what? Fuck
a
it.
veiled elbow to a number of
They're
people.
doing B rooms and they're making their living and like whatever. That sometimes their audience doesn't. It's the first time they're seeing them, so let them do
I
it.
guess that's just like that was always my fear. I said that to the woman who owned Joker's, the club I started. It was like, because your career begins and ends largely in Holiday Inn ballrooms.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like you start it there because that's the only place they'll give you a gig, and then you like when you start, you see the person on their way down, and that's the only gigs they can get. And they're like, oh, why? You know, when me and Foxworthy started, and you're like, well, he's Foxworthy, and we're in Biloxi, Mississippi, at a Holiday Inn. So.
Right.
Sorry, we're taking many detours.
That's fine. That's good.
It was never better. It was never any better. But a nation is not soothed when they tell her, and the doctors all look shocked. I apologize to make this about politics, but that verse just smacks through. This song is 2001-ish.
Yeah, the album came out in like I think right after 9/11.
Oh, really?
So like
Oh,
it was
wow.
written before 9/11.
Yeah.
Yep.
But so
Like end of the Clinton years. I'm
sure,
assuming.
the end of the
Yep.
Clinton years and George Bush years.
Yep.
And all that. So it's not clearly written for Make America Great Again. But when
Yeah.
when I read those lyrics, I was just like, that's what it sounds like to me. Like what are you expecting? Like, what are you trying to get us back to? Like, what is it that you miss so much? What is it that's better? And I was just like the way they just plainly say it was never any better. It's always been kind of bad.
Yeah.
What the uplifting song?
Like I said, I was in a weird place when it finally connected
Yeah.
to me. But I mean, yeah, that's kind of how I took it too. Because I mean, if you remember kind of that, like, I was always aware of politics throughout, you know, my life. When I was like 7, I could name like all the presidents in order. Like it was always a thing. But like, I think when I was like, at this point, like 2000, 2001, you saw kind of the shift from like, I don't know, like I'll just always remember that first Bush campaign, and it was like things used to be. It's kind of like what you're saying. It's I mean, it's now what's happening with Trump like times 1,000.
Right.
It's like things used to be better. And it's like, did they?
Yeah.
Were they?
For who and when?
Yeah.
Like
I mean, again, I was so young, but you just have to listen to punk music to go like,
No, it
things
wasn't.
weren't great under Reagan.
No, we always think that, and it makes me always feel like we're just like in a time loop when you like go back in history and you realize like we just keep having the same fucking problems over and over and over on a
Yeah.
loop. Like our decades are Groundhog Days over and over and over.
And
Yeah,
haven't any of y'all seen Pleasantville? Like that's what the whole movie.
I know. Exactly.
There's also like a personal aspect to it. Like it was never better. It was never any better. Like I find like I'm a guy who carries around a bunch of regret and can be a gloomy and a brooder. But like that's something that would be healthy for me to tell myself. Like there was a reason you got out of that relationship. There's a reason you quit that job. There's a reason you left that. Like anything that any period of my life I'm looking back on, like I should have done better then. Like should you have?
Yeah.
Like there's a reason you got out of that. You weren't happy.
Yeah.
I wonder what the past looks like, and this is like whatever, but in a pre-social media world. Like, because you look back at the past now, and like for me, like I'm still like you said, past relationships or past whatever, like there's still tangible connections to all the past periods of my life where you can kind of look at someone still in it or still a friend with a person or still whatever and go like, you just remember it warmly because you see it portrayed back at you still in a positive light. Like,
Right.
even again, just to go back to the comedy thing, like I see people that I know are just miserable still doing it, but still doing it. But you watch they're like, great show. And again, the Holiday Inn in Biloxi. And you're like, you hate yourself so much right now, but you seem to be having so much fun. It's like, do I miss that? And it's the same thing with relationships. Like you see someone like, oh, just had a great night with whatever, this person that you're like, thank God I got that toxic person out of my life. Then you see someone that you both had as connection with a friend and you're like, was it toxic? Like, I just wonder if without social media, if you'd just be like left alone with your own memories, you're like, well, yeah, that was nasty.
Mhm.
Yeah, I go back and forth with those memories. Like sometimes you just remember like the good parts and you're like, oh, maybe I was a little too hard on that relationship. And then you're hit with the like, oh no, that's why it was bad. Like,
No, I remember now.
That was bad.
Mhm.
Nope. Yep.
Yeah.
It's like you're the hamster who touched the electric button again. Like, oh, I get it.
Still bad? Got it. Still bad.
Yep.
But everybody grows up weaned on some sick late century dream, or the happy face on a shirt smiling shop till you drop. Yeah, so we get some late stage capitalism criticism.
Yep.
I like it. I like it.
That's a very punk rocker accidentally in the mall kind of line.
Uh-huh.
What the fuck is this? Hot topic? Come on, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean that very, and it made me maybe even like refocus, like, oh, is this song about something else? Because that really does feel like more wider. And like, especially if you take it with the line before it, it's like, it was never better, but why do you keep striving for whatever you're shopping for or whatever?
Right.
Everybody lives in a knot. Everybody lives in a knot. Everybody's trying to make space around what they think they've got. And then the final line, they twist it around. Everybody's trying to hold on to a dream, even as they watch it rot. Like, that sounds like you sitting in Orlando.
Yep, that's me. So
do you hear this line and all of a sudden you're just like, your whole world became clear?
Yep, honestly, yep. I mean, it was, so this album has a song on it called Art Class. It's like very up tempo, very like, I would put it on a lot when I was in a bad mood, because it is just very like, the video's goofy, like it's just a fun,
He'll
like,
bring you up.
yeah. And
You're doing the opposite of what we do. Like we wallow when we feel bad. And you're like, I'm gonna lift myself up here.
I'm gonna try, it doesn't always work. But yeah, so that I put that track on. That's how this all started. I was in that, I started, like I said, I just remember the room in Orlando and I put that track on to try to lift myself up, and then I was doing stuff, or I was writing or whatever. That's not true. I wasn't writing anymore at that period, but like doing
tweeting.
Doing whatever I was doing. And then, yeah, this came around and that was the line that I just went, and that's what you've done. And look at the credit card debt you're in, and look at all your, all the mistakes you made to get like, because I think stand-up is at a point, I mean, really I think art that you follow and you make a career, like that's the other thing that I try to tell like younger comics, is like, have fun with it.
Yeah.
Don't make it your job. The second you make it your job, it becomes really stressful and you lose a lot of the passion, because it's just like, oh fuck, am I gonna pay my rent this month?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that line, I was just like, oh, I've burned so many things to get to this point.
Yeah.
And this point is sitting in Orlando and not wanting to go on stage tonight anyways.
Right.
Like, so yeah, that was and I mean, especially now, like knowing where this band was at that point, like you kind of wonder, like, was that his thought process when he was writing this?
It sounds like it.
Yeah, like what have I mean, they ended up, I mean, I don't know how much research you guys did into like Merge Records and everything, but like if you see him interview now, it's like, yeah, for the first whatever decade plus of Merge Records, the band funded the label. Okay. And then they released the first Arcade Fire album.
Oh.
And he's like, yeah, now the label funds us being able to do this.
Got it.
So it really was a continual, but at this point I don't think that Arcade Fire album had come out yet. So it was really like, you had to just be like, what have I been doing? And I mean, to me too, it was the same thing. It was like, what am I going to do next? Because like, that was really a hard decision sitting there. I was like, well, I can't keep doing this. And what I did, and again, kids, get serving experience. You can always fall back on it no matter what. But like, yeah, that's
but you had your fingers in other pots. Like I would tell the young comics too, like, don't just do stand-up, like do sketch comedy. Like now there's so many ways to do content and put your fingers in other things. And like, you have like the background knowledge of like how to put on a comedy show and how to wire it,
right.
Like, expand. Don't just do comedy, just do
now that I'm out of the game, I'm amazed at the hatred that stand-ups have for improv.
Oh, I know.
You didn't know that at the time?
Oh, no, I knew it.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I definitely felt it, and I agreed with it, when I
Yeah.
was actually doing it. But now, looking back, because it only goes in that one direction. Like stand-ups hate improv people. Improv people don't hate stand-up.
Improv people don't hate anything. They
And
were,
no, they're
they were
happy.
raised in good families.
Yeah.
I did both. I feel very balanced because I did both. And I was always like, why are they hating on it so bad? Like, I do stand up and I don't hate what I'm doing over here. I thought it was pretty fun.
Because you seem to be enjoying that. And this is not a job for those that are enjoying it. It's a weird life calling where I will hate myself.
But here's the thing is like, people think like improvers is doing like, we're just like fun and everything, but stand up is so much more controlled. Like, you know what you're going to say. You have a set list. Improv is like, we bombed at improv so many times. And to me, it was so similar to stand up because like, I was like, I have this controlled set that I wrote in stand up and I can bomb. And then over here in improv, we're just literally fucking making it up as we go. And sometimes it's great. And sometimes it bombs so bad, I would just die laughing on stage.
I think the thing is that like bad improv is just bad improv. Like it takes years and years and years to learn the rules and get really good. It's like anything else.
Practice, lots of practice.
It's a skill. It's definitely a skill. Like I've done improv classes where I'll be on a scene and it's just like, this is hopeless. Like there's nothing. Like, and I know it, thankfully not in front of an audience, just in front of like other classmates, but you're still like, this is boring as shit. But then the instructor will stop it and make like the most minor tweak, like just like instead of using this emotion, use this emotion, and then all of a sudden the scene works. It's like, how do you do that? Yeah, like it just trains you to write so incredibly quickly. Yeah, like it stops you from doing that. Oh, I've got to wait for the muse to move me, or I need 3 hours to come out with just the right kernel. It's like, no, there's rules to this.
It's being super present and like your brain can't be anywhere else but like what is happening. Me and Sarah Talamash, we did UCB in New York, and I think it was like our first one. And at the end of like your training, you go to the stage, the UCB stage, where they did ASCAT. And then you do a performance in front of an audience. And me and Sarah had just kicked ass during the class. Like we were like so good at it because we'd already been doing it in Houston. And we did that performance and we blew it. We blew it so bad to the point where there was a moment we were both on stage and we went so blank that we both just stared at each other with like an awkward silence. And then we both just started laughing because we're like, we fucked this up monumentally. But like it.
One of my instructors would bring me aside like after every class and we would like stop writing.
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about? He goes, you were clearly off stage trying to get to that one line. Like you had a joke in your head, you brought it up on stage, and then you twisted everything to
try to make it work, and that ruins the scene.
Yep. He was like, that's called making it all about you, man. Like, oh, I thought I had a good joke though.
Yep, you gotta let that go. The minute someone tells you you're a cow, you gotta drop everything and be a cow.
Yep.
You know? Yes, and moo.
Yeah, I never did it.
It made me a good actress. I did a lot of sketch after that, and it makes you a better actress because you just learn to just like give in to whatever you're supposed to be.
I'm sure it is. I for me, and this is whatever, but like I think it's for everybody to stand up. Like you do a lot of your shows when you start, like there's some improv group that's like, hey, you can do 10 minutes in front of us. And you're like, all right. But like, at least when I started in 2000, that was like right after Whose Line came out.
Oh, then the short form improv, totally different scene.
But there were 8,000 improv groups in the greater Columbus and Cincinnati areas where I started. And it was like, all of you have a good member.
That's so true.
Like if we could just make, it was like watching a little league park where you're like, man, we can make a sweet all-star, like we can make a good travel team. Good Lord. Like, but watching you all together, it's just like, oh, don't you guys know each other?
That's really funny. That's so fucking true.
No, it's probably because the good people don't want to work with the other good people. Like I like being the best guy in my improv.
Right, which is why then you should be doing stand-up.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
I always thought of stand-up as like it's the pure distillate of funny. Like the very best stand-up is like this idea can't get any funnier. Like this guy has taken it on the road. He's been doing this joke for a year. He's cut all the fat off it. Like he just gets right to the point. Like this is the very big, you can't get any better than this.
That's why I always liked Geraldo. Like I worked with him a couple times. That was always like his premises, a lot of them were just common premises.
Yeah.
But he had the best joke that you've ever heard on every single one of those premises. Right. It's like, oh, everybody's doing a joke about that. Yeah, but they're not doing that one.
Yeah.
they should all stop.
Yes.
And that just gets to be hits.
Yes.
Because you're not going to write a better joke than that.
Oh, God. I love that whole class of comics, like that whole time of comics. You said the first comedian you saw at the Laugh Stop was who?
David Tell.
David Tell, and mine was, I think, Kathleen Madigan.
Mhm.
So good.
That might
So
have been the
good.
week after.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I we bought tickets for David Tell, and then your chances of winning tickets are 100% then, because
Yes.
you paid for it.
Right.
So I think the very next week was Kathleen Madigan, so you have to
Mhm.
go back. So I saw two of the very best. Like,
Mhm.
it's amazing to me that Kathleen Madigan doesn't get the respect that she deserves. Because
Isn't
there's
it
no one
mind-blowing?
smoother and more natural.
Oh, and I still remember the jokes she told, and this was in the 90s, and I remember her
Mhm.
jokes. They were so funny,
Mhm.
so good.
Oh, the fish getting abducted by aliens.
I loved her like talking about going to Arizona. It was her first time to the desert, and she was just like, what kind of snakeskin people live here? And then she was just like, it looked like something that was like being built or under construction. She's like, I'll just come back when it's finished. Like, she's so good. All right, so you said something about like you like this band because it's a band that like you grew with. Did you want to elaborate more on that? 'Cause-
Well, I mean, I think I grew later with, like, I
Later
think they
with.
were growing and it took me a while to catch
Yes.
up. But I guess like that was kind of the reason for picking this, besides the fact that it led to a very good discussion of stand-up.
Yes, I know, right? I had no idea this was going to go this direction.
But I like, do either of you have bands like that where like they were on your periphery or whatever, and then
Yes.
you were like, oh wait, I love this band.
Mine was the Pixies.
Really?
Everybody in the 90s listened to the Pixies, and it was one of like, you can't listen to every band, even though
Mhm.
like it's in this genre. Like there were things that were just out of reach. I'm like, I'm still inundated in these 5 bands. I can't add a new one to my list. And so everyone I knew, like the Pixies, I knew like back in when Nirvana first came out, that they loved the Pixies. I knew the Toadies loved the Pixies. And then it wasn't until like the early 2000s when they kind of came back that I was like, okay, now I can do it. And then I got super into the Pixies, like way late. Like Frank Black was old at this point, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my band that I came
Okay.
too late. Yeah.
Did you have one?
No, I don't think so, because I'm just got rooted in my old ways. I don't think that I've like become a fan of a band since I was like 25 or 26.
Wow.
Oh wow.
Like, which is ridiculous. I mean, there's no way that I should turn myself that old in my mid-20s, but I did. Like,
Well,
I haven't.
I don't know. You just recently became a fan of Billie Eilish.
That's true.
Yeah.
You know, I did, but I think that was because I felt the need to pick up something new.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I better open my mind up somehow.
I've done a shitty job of it, but like, because there's only a few, but like, I remember the Black Keys hit me hard, where I was like, oh, I really like this. I can get into this. And then the Lumineers have hit me hard. I really like them. And there was another, Lana Del Rey. I'm a new
Yes.
fan of Lana Del Rey.
Yes. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I went through a period too, like in the early 2000s, like probably from like 2000 to 2005, where I was like, well, like that's like when like new metal was becoming a thing, and I was just like, well, the world doesn't have anything to offer me
don't
anymore,
like this
so I'm
anymore.
just done with me. I think I'm just
Yeah.
done finding bands, and it probably wasn't until like 2007 where I was like, oh, hey, there's still bands out there,
Yeah.
you know. And I mean, part of that was also just being wrapped up in like starting stand up
Your
and like,
life.
yeah, and like just trying to figure out who I wasn't as an adult. But yeah,
Yeah.
like I feel like I vastly, whereas like now frequently I'm just like, ooh, who's that band? Like I listen to
Oh.
podcasts just to like find new bands.
Yeah.
I need to do that. I need to do that because I'm like, well, I have a podcast about music. And also I'm like, I love music. Why did I turn my back on the new stuff for so long? But yeah, I mean, having a kid, man, that really takes you out of it. You're just watching Disney, and I know the whole soundtrack to Moana, but which is very good, by the
It
way.
is.
It's the Lin-Manuel Miranda. Of course it's good. But Ben's got to pee. Probably have to wrap this up soon. Yeah, you just realize you're like, oh, I miss it though.
Yeah.
Like I love music. What am I doing? Why am I ignoring it and only listening to my old like first wave on Sirius XM? I gotta stop it because even I'm getting tired of hearing Joey. Like even I'm finally
listening to that
there.
the other day, by the way.
It's so good.
It is good. Which again, this is like so I mean, we might as well just jump off since Ben's not here,
Yeah.
but like so I didn't really, I mean, I knew that song was about her dating an alcoholic, but like it wasn't until you guys did that on the podcast that I realized like, oh, it's the guy from Wall of Voodoo.
Right.
And so I was listening to them the other day. My friend made like this best of Concrete Blonde like CD that he gave me.
Nice.
And I was just, I found, my dog actually almost ate it, and that's why I found it. And I was like, oh, I should listen to this before she eats it. And so I put it on, and that, what is the name of the song? Ways and Means to Go to New Orleans and Go Down to the River.
I don't know. I'm an awful Concrete Blonde fan because I like Joey and I like one of their songs.
Whatever, it's like, it's called like Grave something. I can't remember, but anyways, I was listening to that and I was like, oh my God, I can hear so much Wall of Voodoo in that song. And like, I never even made, because it seemed like such disparate timelines and like, why would these things even connect? And then like, I listened to that and I was like, yeah, I can hear that influence.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like, that's, I mean, not to say like he helped write it or anything. I'm just saying like, you can hear the influence.
The influence, yeah.
And I wouldn't have known that. So.
Yeah, I didn't know it either. I mean, I didn't know for the longest time that she wrote it specifically about Mark, whatever, the one voodoo guy, until my friend Christine told me that, because I was saying how we were just in conversation. I was like, it's one of my favorite songs. And she goes, you know, Joey died, right? And I was like, how do you know that? And she was like, it's this, you know, and then she broke it down for me. I was like, oh, I didn't realize it was such a fucking true personal song. Okay. Yeah. So we're talking about Joey.
Oh, sorry, everybody.
but I know, I mean, I think that's like I don't know, the discovery of that, and like both the discovery of new bands and the discovery of like how old things like intersect, to me is just always like, I mean, duh, anybody who's listened to this, you can see how like how things intersect.
Yeah.
But like, it really like just that, like as soon as I watched you guys talk about that, then heard that song that's kind of like a Wall of Voodoo song, it was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
No, it starts making sense. All right, is it time for Jeremy to do 6 Degrees of Tinted Windows?
Sure, this one is super easy. Because John Worster, who plays drums in Superchunk, and Bob Mold's band and the Mountain Goats, and like for 43 other people, was also the tour drummer for Whiskey Town when they opened for John Fogerty.
Okay.
And Whiskey Town, of course, then did the album Pneumonia that featured Don't Be Sad, which James E. Ha both played guitar on and co-wrote.
All right.
So that was a
quick and easy.
Yes.
Quick and easy. This is going to be the easiest podcast to edit.
How much research do you put into those segments? Like, do you kind of like have it in your head?
So like that one, yeah. I can just,
listeners want to know.
Yeah, no, it's a fair question. I know Standup brought it up. I was like,
Standup. I was like, hey, asshole, don't call him out right now.
I've known Doug for so long. I had to throw him out of hotel rooms. So Doug's all right. It's all right that Doug did it.
All right.
So I'm trying to think, what was the one? Maybe it was who was last week?
Billy.
Radiohead.
Radiohead.
Yeah. So like that one, I knew that Ed O'Brien and I forget the drummer's name were in that band with Neil Finn, and then it was just like a real quick like jump. So like I usually need to look one thing up on one side. Like there's always like it unlocks one way or the other. It's like I can either go from Tinted Windows to a point, and I'm like, there's a way to get, I just can't find that jump, or it's the back where I'm like, I just need one kick.
Yeah.
And then I can figure out how to do this. So it's 5 minutes, honestly, of research usually. Like I said, like one like that, like I can just do the Tommy Stinson ones I could do usually off the top of my head because I had done so many like.
Right. Because you used to do it on a radio show.
Well, I did it on a radio show, or I just do it to pass the time.
Okay.
Like when I was like, seriously, when I was touring, like
this is your Wordle.
Yeah, when I was touring, I would just do those things in my head. Like a song would come on the radio, and it'd be like, how quick can I get this person to Tommy Stinson?
That's so fun.
So like Tinted Windows is taking a little more time because it's like, I know those connections are there, and even like what we just did, like Tommy Stinson also played on that Whiskey Town album.
Right.
Like
exactly.
so like that's how I know that Whiskey Town album. So
right.
Well. So like 5 minutes of research. It's usually not much. I just usually need a kick one way or the other to like get me somewhere.
Does it make you nervous? Like if we do like, so next week, I'll tell you guys in a minute what we're doing next week, but we're doing a band from like the 1960s. Like, is that when you're like, okay, now it's going to be a little bit more work?
It's not work. I think the thing is, it's like, can I make it interesting? Like, I think I've sent you a couple where I'm like, this sucks. Like I've written it in the email. I'm like, I did it, but I bored myself doing it.
Right.
So like sometimes I don't, because I think when we started it, I really was trying to just show I could do it as fast as possible. Like 2 steps, here we go. And like now I'd really rather like do a narrative. So like when you say like it's a band from the 60s, I'm like, oh, this could be fun.
Okay.
Because I like finding those weird super groups, like the ones that I talked about last week, or like you know, the backbeat band that did that Beatles movie. That's like the guy from Soul Asylum and Afghan Wigs, and a guy from REM and Sonic Youth and Dave Grohl. Like that's like where you like, I bet people don't even know about this band, and it's such a weird band. Like I mean, maybe it's like self-satisfying or whatever, but I'm like, people should know about this weird ass, or like last week, people should know that there was a band that was the guy from Crowded House and Eddie Vedder and Johnny Marr.
That's that blew my mind. That's like just these worlds that I love each of these worlds separately, but never could figure out how they would collide.
And those are the things where I'm like, I don't know why that, and Tinted Windows is a great example. Like I was in Buffalo, New York, and I was like looking something else up, and I was like, wait, what? I was like, there's a band with the guy from Cheap Trick and the Smashing Pumpkins and the guy from Pounds of Wayne and a Hanson. What?
Hanson,
and I put something on Facebook, and I was like, why did no one tell me about this? And like 3 of my friends were like, yeah, dude, I've known about that for 2 years. And I'm like, well, then you're an asshole. Like, why did they know about it? So like, I think things like that are just like that. To me, it's more, sometimes I'll do more work just to get it to where I can like work those kind of like weird things in, as opposed to like,
weird.
then so-and-so was on a producer on this album. They produced this album and no one cares. Now it's time to go home.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll leave that into, unless you have anything left to say. Thank you, Jeremy, so much.
Thank you.
This was really, really great. This is not the direction I thought the song was going to go in, but it's all stand-up comedy and shitting on improv, which is always fun. So next week we are going back to this, I think it's the 60s. I hope I'm not getting this wrong. It's the Animals' House of the Rising Sun, which is just a great, I loved this time of the 60s, like when the Stones were doing Paint It Black, and like I love this dark music that was happening. And this song is great because when I've just done a little bit of research so far, like it's one of these like old songs that I don't even know if anyone knows like who initially wrote it, and the lyrics have changed with each person that does the song. And there's no one knows exactly the origin of what the House of the Rising Sun was. Like, was it a prostitution place or was it an all-girls orphanage? So there's a lot to break down, and it's just a fucking great song.
Yeah, it's a legitimate, for real American folk song.
Yeah.
And the first song my guitar teacher taught me when I took guitar lessons.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm excited. We all can Vogue together.
I think I've never done that.
You can Vogue with us. You can Vogue with us. And Vogue.
1, 2, 3.
Rock the Cash Bar is produced by Diane Gallagher, music by Chuck Savage and Eddie Hawkins. Special thank you to Jeremy Essig for 6 Degrees and to Sarah Wessling for the Guilty Pleasures vocals. Our website is rockthecashbarpodcast.com, and there you can find links to our Spotify playlist and to our Patreon. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you next week.